So it's the most. I mean, World Travel Market is the most phenomenal event anyway. The whole. We almost didn't need a technology event within World, because I was walking around the stands. There's augmented reality stuff going on just on everyone's stands. I mean, it's the most fantastic thing. But so maybe the first question we should ask, both from the point of view of your own organizations, but also from the point of view of where people are up to, is just how far along the journey are you seeing organizations when you look around you and when you look at yourselves? Because we're clearly not at the starting blocks anymore. Greg, maybe I'll start with you on that one.
Yeah, I think, and I'll go broader than just hospitality, which is, I think the travel industry is actually at a very interesting kind of nexus from a technology perspective, which is, I would say there's a lot of chatter around things like blockchain and, augmented reality, AI, machine learning. And that's been going on for a couple of years. And we're now at a point where you're actually seeing some things that are actually using that capability. For the first time, maybe, even last year, you couldn't find an application anywhere out there that was truly using real machine learning, real artificial intelligence, real capabilities. So I think we're kind of at this nexus where people are kind of getting to that place, and maybe more broadly, actually coming, this is not a knock on all the people that got in the front of it, but actually coming up with ideas that are actually going to make some money. Mm-hmm. Things that are actually going to generate revenue, they're going to drive down costs, they're going to change the travel experience, change the way that consumers interact. And so when I look at the floor this year compared to prior years, there's some stuff out there that's real and is going to make a difference. And so I think it's an interesting time.
Francesca, it's a complete cliche to say we're at a tipping point. But are we actually at a tipping point?
I would put it in a different way. I would say that I completely agree with what Greg said, but I would like to add the fact that we are moving from a moment where technology was not available for anyone because of cost, to a moment where technology is available for everyone, which is a problem. Because what I noticed, especially in this area, and every time I see technology area, technology is very much pushing toward performances. So, it's not only just functionality that technology delivers, but it's the result behind technology. So this is putting a tremendous pressure on the travel company to understand which is the right technology. It's not a matter of availability, it's a matter of choosing the right one, mm-hmm. which is moving higher the challenge for the providers in the travel sector.
So, Chad, is it a case we've got too much choice at the moment? It's just
fragmented? Probably yes. I think yes, and that will require additional education because, it's like sort of like a train to catch every time. Every time we think we have catch this train, it goes,
it turns into a moose.
Exactly. So, before it was easy to say, we were talking about big data some years ago, and we were complaining in the sector that we didn't have the infrastructure, we didn't have the technology, our data center were not speaking to each other, so it was like a chimera or sort of like fantasy. But now big data are available and infrastructure is there. Now the use of big data and how to maximize the use of it is where the next challenge is. And we see two different paces, of traction. So technological providers and technological company, digital company are really pushing the bars to really improve performances. But I'm wondering how fast the players in the market and how experienced they are to capture the best opportunity for them. We discussed this morning about the fact that it's not about technology, it's about defining commercial strategy.
Sure.
Yeah. So this is my consideration. Mm-hmm. Always two paces.
Chad.
Yeah, probably because London's my home, I've been coming to this for years now. It's been interesting to see the transition of the whole entire conference. When I first came, it was a shock that there was hardly any technology at all, or there was a little corner in some backstage, to the point of now where it's starting to mature into having this sort of a follow-on to the conference. And it's neat to see how that starts to blend. And contrarian, it's almost nice also to have the non-tech parts too, because I was speaking to somebody recently, they were just commenting on how it's nice to be able to go out and see the dancing and the other parts that make travel real, and it's not about the tool or the application or the other thing that is that. So it's starting to finally get its footing around how those things start to blend together, which is nice.
And is there any? Won't go back to you because your microphone's good.
Tech problem.
I did technical things. Just okay. Shelf those. What's really exciting you at the moment, Greg, in terms of, I mean, there's lots of things you could do, but what really kind of makes you go, wow?
Yeah, I actually think it's two things, which is one is, if you think back even 5 years ago, but certainly 10 years ago, the cost for a startup, so the cost to like really begin to apply technology to a problem, find a solution, get the capital raised that you need to do that, it was a big number, right? Especially if it was something in travel, because the problem that travel has is that you have to operate at scale. So you don't go like little teeny tiny steps up. You go from 0 to like 100 right over the top. And the ability to use a cloud environment now, so whether it's AWS, whether it's Oracle, whether it's Microsoft, and be able to say, look, I can stand up an environment, I can begin to operate in a PCI compliant way with all of the GDPR issues that exist over here, all of the regulations, and still be secure and stable and other stuff without spending all of my capital on that and being able to spend my money and time on human capital, getting the best employees, and solving that problem. I think that drives a significant amount of new innovation into the space that we couldn't have seen 10 years ago.
That's really, so I just had a moment, just as you were saying that, because there's a lot of people that say artificial intelligence is going to do away with jobs, and it's all, we're going to automate ourselves out of existence. I think, I can't see us sending our robots on holidays instead of us. But really interestingly, what you're saying is the build-up of the platform is essentially freeing us to innovate, to be creative.
And to focus on human capital. It's actually bringing back the ability for you to focus that initial startup capital on people and not on infrastructure and all this other stuff that gets in the way of that, and allows for an innovation platform that really comes at a low cost, but provides a significant ability to bring real human capital innovation into the platform. I think we're at a really pivotal place in terms of the way that we use compute power. So.
Francesca, what's your wow factor?
It's very difficult to make any sound comment after what he just said, so I will try to put the focus away from human capital because I thought it was brilliant. Now, I think what excites me the most, probably because I spent the majority of my life in the travel coming from the online world, which is a world that goes very faster. And when I landed 5 years ago in Amadeus, I was a little bit shocked about the difference, the calm and the pace and the rhythm and the lack of, energy in a way. And, it seems like it was not still because, of course, we have been investing. But what really excites me is that now the rules are completely changed. And especially in this moment, which is a very tough moment for the distribution, and we know what's going on, I think it's really exciting because it's the first time in the market since ages, where people really have to start thinking very faster and act quickly, otherwise they will lose retrain, which is posing a great threat. But again, combined with the value behind the capital is really turning, this is a tipping point, I think. I would say this is a tipping point.
So
the speed and the human capital, the two things together are completely destroying the past image of what we were used to think about just until, 1 year ago, probably.
It's the crisis creating the opportunities, what venture capital Susie Stanford was saying.
Exactly. So, yes.
And Chad, what's wowing you at the show?
A couple things. I don't know if anybody saw the little fireside chat with Chris last night, but one of the things that he said I thought was kind of interesting is we, as travel tech, spend so much time about the people going off on that destination, but as we know, they do that 1 or 3 times a year at a minimum. So for travel tech startups like me, what's interesting is how those technologies are now starting to blend to be also your everyday sort of thing. So I think Chris kind of noted that he has a lot of people who's using his content to go and travel and discover amazing things, but it's also people who just want to check out a new restaurant in town or experience something with their kids. So the ability to step out of what travel is interesting. You don't have to get on a plane to be having a travel experience, and to be able to use some of these new amazing tools and technologies to really start experiencing and broadening our horizons. As hopefully why we got into the travel business to begin with, is explore more and connect with people is one of the more exciting parts for me.
It's interesting. When we were talking about augmented reality yesterday, and one of the questioners was asked, he had the Waxworks, and he said they'd invested in augmented reality, and no one was using it, and that was kind of a bit of a disappointment. But the response was the fact that all of that stuff's joining up right now, and as augmented reality, so you won't need your own app. Everyone will be using the same technology for it, and suddenly all those investments will become the same. So we're seeing lots of things join. It won't necessarily happen, but we're seeing lots of things join up. Greg.
No, it's been interesting to watch the evolution of that augmented reality kind of from beginning to end, because people initially in the travel space actually got nervous, right? Because it was, well, if people can just sit in their house and experience what it's like to be on, in Mallorca for spring break, are they still going to go to Mallorca? And I think what's happened is it's the exact reverse, right? Which is you sit in your house and do that, and then you go, I didn't really want to pay to go. Now I really want to pay to go.
I gotta be
because it looks really cool. I want to go.
Yeah, totally.
And so I think it's going to be how you use it and how it gets. So we've seen a couple of chains that are actually using it to do that destination explore kind of experience, which really does. I mean, I mentioned it this morning, but on travel websites, hotels in particular, people spend more time on photos and virtual tours than they do any other page. So it doesn't matter whether it's lastminute.com, Expedia, the hotel's website, they spend more time on photos than they spend on anything else. And yet very few sites allow you to book from a photo. They don't let you go, I want to go, please. And so things like that, things like virtual augmented reality that allows you to begin to do things that actually is past just search but goes from shop to book. I think as that kind of grows, you'll see a change in the environment.
It's really interesting, and I think a lot of it was Mike Croucher that said it on day one in the keynote. He said, blockchain, it's overhyped. It's just a database, and it'll find its use cases. And I thought, yes, it's overhyped, and we will find out that it will be used for something, and suddenly it'll become something that people use. So a lot of these technologies are both kind of they're their own curse, but then they'll find their place.
Yeah, I don't mean to, but so to Croucher's point, I know Mike. So the issue with blockchain and some of these other things is they get talked about as if the thing that they're doing is changing the economic model, which I think was Francesca's point earlier, the commercial model and everything else. When in reality, what they're doing is changing the underlying kind of infrastructure question, which is how would you implement something? Blockchain, great example of something that could be used as a new inventory mode. New way to do inventory in the travel and transportation space via blockchain. Does that change the commercial model? Absolutely not. So there are things that are in DC. So I don't work at Sabre anymore, so I can say it.
Yeah.
In DC, doing very little to change kind of anything other than the tech standards. Is it changing the commercial model? Absolutely not. So you've got these issues, which is you've got a technology that really should be looked at for how can it improve the experience, that gets talked about as if it's going to revolutionize the commercial model without any real strategy or direction or anything else around. This is how it's going to change how people do business. So anyway.
No, I completely agree. Especially, I think, what he mentioned about there is an application that Amadeus is developing exactly in the direction that Greg mentioned. It's a video, and you can click on part of the video and book directly. But the next will be definitely, removing as many steps as possible to go from the inspiration even to the conversion at the end. And in that sense, again, it's not a matter of not having technology available, it's a matter of making the right choice according to the business you're in. Something that works very well for the receptivity business can work. I don't care if I have to buy flight to see what is the place. I care only to see how much I'm paying, how much it will take, and potentially if I'm very tall, that I have enough space for my legs, full stop. So I don't need any pictures of anything.
Absolutely.
So
And I mean, when Facebook first came on the scene, for example, it did the simplest thing. It was just literally a stream of messages, and similarly, a lot of technologies have been just doing the simple thing.
Exactly. But what would be important for me, rather than picture, would be to have to understand immediately into the search funnel if I can save money or what extra I need to pay if I want something specific in a map of an airplane. So it's a different use of technology according to the type of needs you have in that specific moment.
So I want to. I don't want to keep everyone here for too long, and I don't want to cover old ground because we covered a lot of this stuff. But in terms of some of the questions I could ask you, so I'm going to go straight to the nub of it and say this whole conference was all about inspiration to action. So if you could advise, and I know you are advising, but if you could say to people sitting in the audience in terms of what's the one thing or the two things that you would do that you're not seeing behaviorally changing in organizations that you would really strongly recommend? Maybe, I don't know, I'll start with you, Chad. It's, yeah, that's an easy one to answer.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm going to say thank you for that.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So what do you think people aren't doing right now, and what do you think the industry isn't doing right now that should be the simple thing? What's the easy route forward?
Geez, I mean, let me maybe take it a slightly different thing. As a startup founder, you're told all the time to be really, really resourceful with your time, be really, really explicit on who you kind of grant that time to. And as a startup founder, I feel the complete opposite, actually. It's the meeting I thought I had lined up that was really going to be the big one for me that usually is the biggest waste of time, where it's normally this random, tangential, hey, you should talk to a guy who's got a friend, that tends to be the ones that open a door for us. So on a slightly different one, you guys are coming more for corporate from as a startup, some of the things I tell founders is, yeah, you do have to be cautious of your time and really, kind of calculate about it, but also say yes and just say yes to mentoring as many people as you can and try to reach out to as many people as you can, and God only knows what sort of door will open off the back of that, and that's been amazing for me.
So results focused serendipity.
Exactly.
That's what it boils down to. Francesca, what?
Well, for me, I mean, talking about my focus now, which is the online, I think what I'm seeing now, company tends to look really for the short term. I've seen very little long-term strategy coming from the online world. So everybody, there is kind of sort of, indifferentiation risk, which is there. And that's very scaring because they will refocus their budget only on price, which is, the death of that sector, on top of everything that is happening to disrupt the category. So my advice would be really to make sure that you have a long-term strategy to follow, no matter whether it means that you will be losing, some ground at the beginning, but clearly have a long-term strategy and follow them, because that's the only way to differentiate from the competition. This is what I'm seeing.
Thank you. Greg?
I'm hesitant to say this, but I think as I look at this travel and technology, just as it combines as a whole, I think that one of the greater things that holds back the industry is the fact that we spend a lot of time trying to figure out how to go at each other a little bit, as opposed to realizing we live in a world of co-opetition. It really is a world where that from suppliers to third parties to consumers to the agencies to the other, this industry is so intertwined, so interconnected. The reality that we've got to work together to make this smooth and easy, and the fact that sometimes we make that 10 times harder than we need to, I think inhibits innovation in the space. I think it inhibits our ability to get new technology to the table. I think it inhibits our ability to talk about how we should share data. I think it goes back to this morning, which is when you're really looking at a connected environment where that all has to come together. I mean, if take Amadeus as, they're doing 1 billion transactions a day, right? The fact that if you're not focused on how that interconnectivity is going to work, the whole network falls apart, right? So I think if I look at the industry, I would say we need to work better as an industry to drive toward how we can all push the industry as a whole forward, as well as push our individual companies forward. But
Okay. Symbiosis. I mean, it's interesting that you say that a lot of the conversations that we've had are about how to remove friction from the traveler journey. You're talking about removing friction from the industry,
Yeah.
ultimately.
We do believe it's the same. Yeah.
Fantastic. So we're going to wrap it up. Don't move anyone before you go. I've got one last job to do. But first, before we do that, I'd just like to say thank you very much to our panelists. So thank you.
thanks.
Thank you.
So.